We are having now the last keynote speech for today, and when programming this conference together with Pablo, we thought, okay, this is the title is sustainable buildings, and we will stick to this, but it would be beneficial for all of us if we can widen the horizon at a certain moment, and this is the right moment now, and start also put the buildings into perspective, meaning into urbanistic questions and city planning and so on. And we are more than happy that we could convince or invite you successfully, perhaps to put it this way, and we are very happy you are here. The floor is yours, Professor Ute Schneider.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be again. It's the second time, I have to say, in Warsaw. I was here in April, and I really was impressed by the city. And I was also very happy to hear and see that we are here, because I've had the chance to visit quite some places in the city. And one of the developments, I have to say, kind of I find the most successful is this neighborhood here, because it really kind of manages it to, on one hand, kind of densify, but also keeping the soul of the place or heritage buildings in it. And that's the reason why it's so nice. And people adapt to it, and also local people, citizens, use the place. So really reuse as much as we can, adaptive reuse and reduce some things, kind of, but also looking to the beauty of nature that is in here. They also kept a lot of green heritage, and I think that's also some topics I will talk about. So the city of tomorrow is, on one hand, we heard a lot about technology, building technologies. Urban design is very often also about landscape, the in-between, kind of also community creation and social life. And how can this look like, and how can we get again nature into the city, because we need it for climate change. We feel that already very heavily. We managed kind of over the last decennia to push nature completely out. So we have to think about that differently. How we work is a bit, let's say, between three disciplines. So we also work as architects, and that's the reason why we also approach urban design in the third dimension, and also kind of looking to the buildings, how they interact with the space around. But also landscape, or also infrastructure. The right-hand image is a triple dike around the peninsula in Shenzhen. There's no building involved, but how can you create something that kind of protects an island from flood, but also is accessible amenity space, leisure space for people. Vienna is around 120 people from 25 cultures, and I think that is also maybe important, kind of to have this exchange and knowledge from different kind of places, cities. And last time when I was here, I had a former colleague, Sophia, who is living now again in Warsaw, and got this really very, very close insight by her. The working fields are really living environments, residential spaces, tower, residential tower and hotel in Antwerp, then transformation of heritage buildings, old buildings, but also harbor areas, industrial buildings, then culture and education, which is a really huge aspect, kind of, you probably know the right image, strategic planning of the half a city in Hamburg, but also there we were very happy to keep that old storage space, which is now the let's say so to say, Sydney Opera, the Philharmonie of Hamburg. There was also once a kind of headquarter glass building kind of plant there. We are really happy that this is there. Work in innovation, then resilient landscapes, I already said that, and also connecting places, kind of area, let's say station precincts, but also kind of the integration of infrastructure, and we heard it before, that we talk a lot about buildings, and that we also spend a lot of time in buildings, but we also spend a lot of time to go from one building to the other, and the infrastructure, mobility infrastructure, but also supply and disposal infrastructure for that is also key. It's very often hidden in streets. I will also come to that topic later, but we can also integrate and make the infrastructure very, very attractive. An approach, how we do that is really a collaborative approach that is on one hand working kind of with different disciplines, very strongly related with engineers, landscapers, but also sociologists, but also with local people, stakeholders, the politicians. So that has to be done. The city is a negotiation of, let's say, the citizens they live in and they work in and they develop something in. Then a big link to research and development, design, links to the ETH, to a lot of different institutions. You see here let's say, an overview of some of them to bring really in, and I think we heard so much also from Peter Richner about the developments and the technologies, the new technologies, the potential we have, and also from Barbara, new ways of thinking really about how do we build reuse with what we have. The biggest question and challenge we have, I think, is communicating this to everybody that's involved in the game so that we can spread that knowledge to a maximum. One aspect, we're working from a very early beginning in a project with a lot of these technologies, so testing on a very high level with computational design, already exposure to sunlight, privacy, kind of exposure to heating up, let's say, certain facade elements, but also how far can you optimize between the different parameters, for instance, the access of sunlight to the public spaces in relation to densification, but also noise questions around station. You can simulate it in the very early beginning and integrate all these aspects to a maximum so that there's a condensation, integration of all these kind of aspects and not only one. Because monofunctional or only focusing on one thing is always a bit dangerous. So anyone who believes that global warming is a real danger should see dense urban living as a part of a solution. We strongly believe in that. This is from Ed Glaser from Harvard. But we also need to think how we do that, so that we really keep, let's say, we saw that also in the pandemic, we need completely different, let's say, transitions between working, living, leisure, but also open spaces to be capable to do that. Oh, so now I have the same problem. So that is a kind of a quote from Sir David Attenborough. We are part of natural systems. It will hopefully come back soon. I see it. And if we have to really take care of if we want to take care of ourselves, we have to take care of these natural systems because we are part of it. And so not only about humans, it's also about plants and biodiversity. I will come back to that later. So I will stress these topics along 4 topics: radical mixed use, then infrastructure for people, so not only for mobility and especially not only for cars, then nature and the city and its coexistence and the quality of open space, public, collective and private spaces. And this kind of addresses area developments, but also building. So we have everywhere always kind of an organization where people meet, mingle, gather, and on these kind of meeting points, innovation happens. That's also, innovations don't happen behind a computer very often if we are only ourselves busy with something, but with interaction and discussions like, for instance, also this symposium here. So radical mixed use, so the coexistence of difference, and I really strongly believe the city is a coexistence of difference. For a lot of different people, for a lot of different spaces, we need to kind of provide that spaces for different needs. And the city also is an organism to a certain extent, and this potato map for the city, the social map of London from as Abercrombie shows this a bit, kind of there are different cells, you know, they kind of correlate with each other, there are centralities in it. And if you look to the city and let's say, and neighborhoods like that, we are probably much more successful to solve some really challenges we have to solve. So that goes also back from an old model of top-down government kind of development and planning to a collaborative model. So there's a lot of informal engaging. If we see now, for instance, kind of also a lot of whether students, but also Fridays for Futures, you know, kind of a lot of different entities kind of know what we need to do, and we need to allow that kind of transformation to let it happen. The second one is really a programmatic overlay, not kind of really segregate in monofunctional areas like housing, industrial areas, working areas, but really kind of overlap to a maximum. And then also kind of really building an open city that is accessible for everybody and not kind of segregated and creating ghettos. This brings me to the next topic. These are some graphs kind of also in a very strong collaboration with very different kind of entities like MBRDW, Carlo Ratti, Atelier Dreiseitel. An area kind of that is remote, old barrack outside of remote of Heidelberg, looking into kind of what can really radical mixed use mean, hybridization of different functions, but also looking into how can you make such a remote area accessible by public transport, and what do you need that kind of it can function in itself, and only for special purposes they have to go to the city. There was on the right-hand side also, I think that is crucial then to see 3 graphics. One was really the modernistic kind of approach of kind of having everything separate, you know, housing, living, working. The other one, then really clustering what we already learned from Trent Jacobs, kind of to cluster things, to overlay. But let's say due to the digitalization and increasing speeds, we have now really a pixelation in that situation, kind of. So we kind of over a day we really switch from taking care of our children, kind of working, going to school, going to work, let's say doing sports. So it's a completely different mingling, and we also need to provide that proximity to let this kind of to make this possible. This again done really simulated also then in several kind of elements already in a design process is crucial. And you see here, let's say on a neighborhood level or a city area level, but you see it also within a building. Let's say really looking into the energy consumption, but also the sun exposure, the carbon footprint, and test this already in a design phase to come to the optimum equation for building. And you see then also the interdependencies between these different parameters, and that is always kind of the moment where you then, so to say, synthesize. So you really have to look to all the different parameters that they are fulfilled. And by doing that, I think we could really improve a lot in our also development of areas and building stock. Then infrastructure for people, flora and fauna. So trying to create the fluxes we need within a city, and how can we integrate that into urban space. Showed on one project the transformation of the station precinct in Zurich, where we really looked at kind of how can we also look at this kind of track space as a wide space in the city as a river. They were looking at us a bit, are they a bit crazy? What do you want to do? Because we elongated the platforms right and left hand side to say kind of you can walk there, kind of later on you can take this as a sidewalk. At the time there in 2003 nobody believed in it, we just did it, and today kind of they use really, I will show that later, they use this place as kind of next to the track as public space. Why I'm also showing that is that this flows and let's say mobility aspects are really important. This is a map of Switzerland. The flows that kind of go from, you see here Geneva, you have here Basel, you have here Aarau-Olten and Zurich. So you see, let's say, this hub, and what kind of Poland also at the moment is thinking about with this kind of airport, kind of connecting them from the airport to the cities by public transport, and that is crucial. And also looking into that area, kind of that it is more than an airport, kind of that it's an airport city that kind of can exist in itself. What we did at the time is really looking to the public space around that kind of blind spot. This was a post area and let's say this all track spaces, kind of sheds, and then looking how can you maximize the flows getting to this station and this river, and how can you connect over it. By doing so, we kind of developed a model, and I think that's also crucial, which is not a fixed plan. We don't like this notion of master plan, but a development framework. And you see this 3D model, kind of, there is a certain freedom within that, but there are also certain restrictions because you kind of define the public space and so on, and where high buildings can come. And in the middle, you see a possible infill at that time in 2003, which was, and that's also maybe important to say, kind of at the time not digestible in the city of Zurich because it was too free. So this kind of ended up in a shelf. Luckily, it turned out kind of quite okay, because what we defined here is really a lower plinth that goes in like here as well, that goes in a communication and in a dialogue with existing city fabric, and then you build higher once in a while on top of that. And that human scale we really need in a city, and you see it a bit here. So you see here a lower part, and then you see here the existing fabric, so the towers kind of come out of a plinth that is kind of going in a dialogue with the city. And this is one side, it's the north side that gets sun in the south. So you see really the track space and how people use these public spaces directly at the track space. And sure, there is a fence, but the fence doesn't need to look like they very often do. They can be as subtle as this one, and then you have this openness and you see the other side of the city. And this is a new corporation housing, very, very interesting development as well, where they also allow principals sharing spaces to a maximum. But you see, let's say, the bar that is directly, and the greenery that is directly next to the track space. And track spaces have the opportunity to have a high biodiversity, because they naturally, kind of, if you let nature in, it grows. Another project in that relation is again a station, the last stop prior to the airport and the airport region of Montpellier. That project was already called Os Natur Urbaine. There was a big question about the dialogue between infrastructure and nature, because there's a lot of stormwater coming in, you see a lot of green spaces, and how can, let's say, this infrastructure and landscape can correlate with each other and also help. And the infrastructure and the green space also there has a function. So it's not only just a park, it is really stormwater covering, so it has always different kind of purpose. Here you see an image kind of how this looks like. Why we won this competition is because we dared to push the highway to the track space. There were 80 meters in between, which would be nowhere land. You can do nothing with it. As if you bring it as close as possible together, you can bridge it via the station. And then also looking where you need to connect. You don't need to do it everywhere, you just do it where it makes sense, because you connect some other kind of neighborhoods around. And this was then done by, on one hand, the stations, these around in the middle, and the station was interesting enough. Then a later kind of competition, once in a while, I'll show this later, this is also going in parallel. So there's very strongly a collaboration also with different engineers, and there was also a tramline plant that did another engineering office, Richer from Paris. You see here the line goes over the station and then linked it to the airport. So really linking this and overlaying these systems is a crucial aspect. So not thinking in single kind of elements, but and you see here now the urban part, let's say with a tramway kind of on a high street, which it was called, but also these kind of stormwater basins that really kind of engineered with quite some engineering knowledge about how you organize that, how does these ramps have to go, but you see that also behind, again, the tram and the station area. Another project which was a bit repairing a problem we created earlier, and that is what I'm also telling it here, because I like to avoid that the mistakes kind of we did kind of earlier in other countries got repeated somewhere else. And then repair by development. It's Le Faisceau. It's an area behind Paris, behind La Défense, which is called La Poubelle de Paris, because they have thrown everything kind of they didn't want to have in the city regarding infrastructure there. And then later we had to repair it. And this is kind of just an extract from an exhibition and a publication we did around that. That was all related to station precincts and infrastructure, kind of re-knitting the network by repairing the city with movement. Let's say these mobility infrastructures, if we design them kind of in a nice way, they can also work for people, cyclists, pedestrians, and not only for cars or lorries, and also infrastructure space as an urban brace. So embracing this infrastructure spaces kind of make them really adaptable, kind of, and people can use them because it's possible. We just don't started kind of planning like that. Next. Should jump to a plan. Yes. You see here this huge infrastructure bundle, Le Faisceau is bundle in French. And let's say all these infrastructures, also the big highway that is coming in here, that is already covered by a huge project, Les Terrasses, you might know. So we had to really look into the system of infrastructure lines that completely cut it, kind of the different neighborhoods, and they were kind of, you could not go from A to B. But by looking into the system and how can you make it green, you see also we use that streets kind of also to bring much more green into the system. And you see here then an analysis kind of where it makes sense. Sure, the stations were always the point of connecting because you automatically need to go there from both sides. But also where does it make sense kind of to where can you kind of go under or you go over the infrastructure to make it accessible and knit together the adjacent neighborhoods. This is one part of a station, so it goes then down to a project kind of where the trains down. Once in a while they're in an open basin. You see the street, kind of how green it is, and the crossing with a bridge. But also here, and others realized kind of that's one part, the Skyol, where we won a competition here. But also looking into the fringes of the track spaces, GreenNet kind of have their biodiversity corridors, but also drainage, let's say rainwater storage. But it's a completely different sense of arrival if you drive through a corridor like that than if it's just a concrete whole. And how can a street look like? You started here in already in Warsaw, kind of with some streets. The street here is already in that direction. You have a big body of green that also carries water that can really kind of work as biodiversity corridor. And you have the luxury to have these incredibly street profiles because you can just do it. In Switzerland, we had a discussion yesterday. We have not that space of a street kind of to do that. And that is really that brings me to the next topic. So reintegrate green, blue, silver and gray infrastructure. Silver, I call the track, is the track space, and gray is the streetscape. How can we do that? And two approaches there. One is also again a station, Fellenort Eindhoven, where we reduced individual transport lanes on a street to quite a max, to be able to densify around the station, to really have the critical mass of really amenity space, services, gastronomy, meeting spaces, office spaces, residential, but also looking to have a renaturalization of a creek that is going through, kind of dig it up, kind of create a green and blue infrastructure park that is kind of really going through the city. And this is all based also on research and the results kind of certain other research. This is the Global Street Design Guide. I can just recommend. It's really very, very helpful to work with. You see on the right-hand side monofunctional individual transportation street that has a total capacity of 12,300 people per hour. And if you have a multimodal road with public transport, cars, a green lane, cyclists, pedestrian sidewalks, wide way, you have 30,100 kind of a frequency. And that was the reason why we also could do, by that you can really prove you can, with even enhancing the flows through a city, through a street, the attractivity of a street. And that's also from that book. You see really a completely car-related, traffic-related street, and you see what's possible below. This is a project it's quite a time ago, we did for Shenzhen Center, Fujian, where we got the commission to really rethink the big arterias going through the city. This is Shashui Street, how it is, and this is how it could be. And this is another one. This is Shinsu Street, and this is how it could be, how we designed it. And we had a transport kind of engineer on the side of the administration of the city in Shenzhen, and they are normally not that open, but she said to us, you know, it's possible, but it's a political decision, and they have to take this political decision, and they don't do it. So this is, and we face this everywhere, so we really have to look into that, we have to play on all levels, kind of, because it's possible. And it's even much better. And for Eindhoven, we will restructure this street that was kind of along, let's say, this huge arteria that was 107 meter wide. A lot of parking, a lot of slip roads, side roads, you know, some green you cannot really use. We will reduce this to 40 meter. You have buildable construction, you have open space next to that, and it still works. And then it offers these kind of spaces. Also next to a very, very vibrant, very, very dense kind of station precinct. And the last, but not least, quality of these spaces, quality of open spaces, public, collective, private. How do we organize that, and using this kind of this multi-coded, multi-user? Kind of, it's not, the problem what we very often do is that we kind of dedicate one space or one space square meter just only to one purpose. We always have to look in overlays, in proximity, in multi-use, also maybe during the day or during the season, during seasons. So reconceptualize streetscape and urban morphology, and you see this is in Singapore. One project, I will say this, so that is what we very often do, and we should go in this overlay and overlap. And by doing so, we also get much more attractive spaces. You have it just down here. Looking into the porous structure of the ground level, having a multifunctional kind of fill up in these block structures, but also kind of embraced courtyards, kind of a more privacy in the inner spaces. You see then on the right-hand side. So you provide for different needs, let's say this porosity, but this is also here very interestingly, you know, you go somewhere inside, but it's porous, it's open. And it's also kind of going in a relation with the existing context, and that is very often forgotten. So we always need to think upon the perimeter we are building in or planning in, and that's better. This is an image also from this project in Singapore, where we got a completely different commission in Singapore, and Fabrice, the ambassador, knows Singapore very well. It's built up very monofunctional, modernistic in a way since, let's say, since the revolution, kind of 50 years long. This was a kind of a shift in paradigm to change completely, because they want to have a green city. And they understood that they have to change. And this is a completely different research because, but also kind of a truth, kind of that the biodiversity in a city, if we allow it, is bigger than, for instance, in an agricultural field. Or let's say nature, we keep natural elements, they kind of, when the forced nature took over, these biodiversities, ecosystems, they are in itself working. And a park, for instance, kind of just with flowers is not as biodiverse as, so we have to really reintegrate these ecological systems again. The challenge was really, in a way, the task was to shift in paradigm, really to look into a smart, sustainable district that is walkable, that is mixed use, and that people also have a lot of green and walk outside, which is in that climate not so easy. And we have to avoid that we get to the situation to have this climate here by bringing in the nature earlier, because this is a really exercise, it costs a lot of money, and you have a lot of engineering and artificial kind of things. You need them kind of to make it attractive to walk outside. But if we not change, we will get to this situation. And the second one was also kind of, that's the integration of the high-speed railway stop between Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. And the question was then also looking into this completely different mobility network, kind of on a country level, on a city level, but also on a local level. And this competition we won because we dared to tilt the box a bit, to integrate it better into the urban context, but also integrate it better to this exchange modes of different kind of mobility nodes. And these overlays of integrations of different needs are very often not happening, unfortunately, and then let's say resulting in areas that not really work, kind of and this also has a thing that also has an impact on a building site already, kind of also already under construction. You should need to think about, let's say, these changes. I arrived yesterday on the West Station. The platform 9 at the moment is very tricky to get to at the moment. So thinking also in a way, because if it's not attractive, people don't use it. It's very simple. We all have the habit of kind of going to least resistance. So we have to think about how we ourselves would like to have it to use it. And what you get then with this, first of all, you can condense. There was also at the time kind of, this was also part of the perimeter building site, but we said we really keep it on the body of the city and keep as much as possible nature also in that, but also having green on several kind of levels, which is a bit easier in a Singaporean climate, I have to admit, than here. But what I said earlier, we really have to look into this quality of spaces that we really like to use these places and also like to walk, because we take longer distances to walk if it's attractive, if we can meet somebody, if there's something kind of really nice and we have a nice climate and a screen. And maybe, let's say, observe yourself, you take longer distances for a walk if it's nice than a shortcut that is kind of not attractive to do. So like that, we have to design our buildings, but also the area developments, because it's a bit the same. So the city of tomorrow, let's say as a conclusion, I think we can do it, but it's a coexistence of city and nature and how we really organize, let's say, these systems. And it's not that difficult. We can learn a lot from nature, but we can also, and we need to implement all the technology we heard throughout the day, because we are so many, we have to also reduce, let's say, our footprint to a max. Thanks a lot.